Lighting is what breathes life into your world. It creates atmospheres, mood, tension, and it's one of the most powerful tools in Unreal Engine to tell your story and make your projects stand out. In this video, I'll walk you through the essential lighting tools in Unreal Engine, from the basics to tips that can make even a simple scene look cinematic. If you love learning Unreal and want to keep leveling up your skills, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming tutorials. And if you're serious about building a career in video games, not just as a hobby, but as a lifestyle, visit woodland.com and discover the Game Creator Accelerator. You'll learn not only how to master the tools you need, but also how to set strategies to find job opportunities while building your own brand and identity as a game creator. Links in the description. Now, let's get started. Before starting this process, I selected a project in Unreal 5.4.4, though it can work in any other version of Unreal 5 or higher version. And I will select Games, Third Person, Starter Content, and let's name this project. Here's the default. First, I will create a folder called _game. And now let's add a new level, which will be a basic, and from there we're going to play with the lights. Save the level. And now let's start creating the scene to show the potential that lights in Unreal presents. I want to add some assets from the fab. If you don't have the fab button, check on the description because I'm going to add the link to a video where I explain how to enable this plugin of fab. It's the best way to import assets into your project. Inside Facts, look for Quixel. And first off, I will select Materials and Textures. I want a material that looks like a forest. So let's look for Quixel Forest. And by the way, select in the price free in case that you don't have some of these materials available for you. Let's see what we have here. I think I like this mossy rocky ground. Excellent. Add to the project. Back to fab. Now the other thing I want to look for are forest and rocks, or rock. Pick whatever you want. In my case, I want to pick 2 or 3 of them. Right now, the Nordic Forest Cluster Medium, Cluster Rock Medium. I like this rock as well. And finally, I want something that has some rocks on the bottom, small rocks on the bottom. Something like this one is going to work. The Nordic Beach Rock Formation. The next step is about adding a new landscape. I first want to remove this floor, select it, delete it. And even though I don't want to get into the details about how to create a landscape, we're going to do something very simple. Click on Selection, Landscape, select Manage, New, and let's look for the surface that we picked a second ago. This is the material I want to use. So drag this material to the material on the landscape, and then click Create. Leave the rest of the default values. Let's get close. In fact, let's go back to the selection. Look for the player start. Here we are. And if you play the game, oh, I'm falling. Yes, I have to set the landscape in the right position. First off, location, reset it. Let's speed up the camera. And as you can see, the center is exactly where the player is as well. So he's in the corner. I don't want to do that. Let's move the position of the landscape. And let's place it in a place like this. So the player will be very close to the center of the landscape. We start. Here we have it. We have the landscape and the character ready to play. Now I'm going to add the assets we downloaded a second ago. Select the Megascan 3D And now I will filter by static meshes. Now let's add them to the scene. Oh, this one is pretty big. In fact, that probably is open to the other side. Yeah, I'm not going to use this one. Let's add this and this. I can play with these elements. Let's create a copy by Alt and dragging. And let's rotate, play a bit with the rotation. But you just have to play with whatever scene you want. It doesn't have to be exactly like mine. It could be anything. What I want is to just create like a cluster of rocks, one beside the other. And that's it. If we play the game, here we have the cluster of rocks, which by the way looks pretty cool. Now let's talk about the lighting actors. On the right, in the lighting folder inside the outliner, by default you usually have all these actors. The best way to understand how this works is by removing all the actors and starting from the beginning. So I will select all this and delete. As soon as you remove the light, well, you don't have anything that you can see because there is no light on your scene. If you want to see the elements without light, you can click here and select instead of lit, unlit. And here are the elements of your scene. But you are not using the light generated by Unreal. Let's go back to lit. And now let's add the lights. You can add the lights in using two different methods. One is looking for the actors that are classified in lights and adding the different elements of light. Or the one that I prefer by far is go to Windows and select the Environment Light Mixer. Usually you will have it like an option that is floating in front of your screen. I always move it to the bottom. And you will have a list of buttons related to every type of light, like SkyLight, Atmosphere Light, Sky Atmosphere, Volumetric Cloud, and Height Fog. Let's start adding one at a time. So click this one. Now you have Atmospheric Light. Don't mind about this. It's because you need other lights. Create Atmospheric, create the SkyLight. Now the Sky Atmosphere, the Volumetric Cloud, and the Height Fog. And here you have the same light that we started. I'm going to move the elements of light to the lighting folder. That's always a good practice. In the next step, I'm going to disable most of these lights to help you understand what is the role in designing the light for the scene. We will start with the directional light. So click on here and you will see that immediately we have some basic light over the scene. We don't have the environment, we don't have the atmosphere, but we already have the light on the scene. At this moment, you can't even see the sun. You know that is there, but you can't even see the sun. The next one I want to enable is the sky atmosphere. So click here, and now you can see the sky. In fact, you can see the sun. And now you can move the sun using the directional light. So select directional light and start moving the sun and see what happens with the rest of the light in your scene. And in fact, the sun is moving down. You see it on the back. And here it is. You can move the light and you will move the sun as well. And look how beautiful the light works in Unreal. The next light actor we will add is the SkyLight, this one here. Add it to the scene, and you will see that there is a difference of how the light acts when we don't have the SkyLight and when we have it. Look here on the shadows, and if I disable, look that the shadow is not complete in a way. Yeah, you are creating some effects based on the light hitting on the surface, but it's not enough until you add the SkyLight. Now it looks more realistic, and now you can combine. It's a complementary effect to the directional light. Imagine that the directional light, it's the direct sunlight. It's strong, it's directional, and create sharp shadows. But when you use the SkyLight, this is about an ambient light from the sky and the atmosphere. And this creates some soft images, diffuse, and more elements that fills in the shadows. Now move back. And the next element is the volumetric cloud. Enable it, and now you will see clouds around your environment. And the final light actor is the exponential height fog. Look at the distance, how the end of the horizon is presented. But now when we add the exponential height fog, it looks more realistic. Now that we presented all the light components that we use in a scene, let's get into some of the details and parameters that we can use. I like to work with the environmental light mixer because once you add the components, the lighting actors into your scene, you can see the ones that you already added, and they present the most basic parameters or the most important parameters for every actor. Of course, you can also go to the details and see all the parameters, but it's very useful that you have the main ones here. Now let's get into some details related to first the directional light. You can find it here. You can find it here in the light mixer. Let's find the component of directional light, and I want to move it up. The directional light won't be affected because we move the position or the location of this actor in the scene. What matters is the movement of the light in terms of rotation. You can also rotate the light by using Ctrl L and then moving your mouse. Two parameters I want to mention are in particular the intensity and the light color. If you increase the intensity, let's say to 100, then you will see that it's very clear, but then the light adapts. The same thing happens if you go to, let's say 1, and it's dark, but then the lights adapt. The adaptation of light is related to a parameter called auto exposure. There are two ways of solve or to disable the auto exposure. The first one, and the one we're going to use here, is going to edit, project setting, and look for auto exposure. This is the parameter that we'll uncheck. Go back to the scene, and now it doesn't adapt. The other option is that you can use post-process, but like my goal is not at this moment to get into post-processing, that's why I selected the option of project settings. Now you can go back to the original value, and this is how it's going to look, or you can increase the value, let's say to 100, and then it's going to look very, very shine. The other parameter I want to mention in the case of the directional light is the light color. You can define, let's say that you are in a different planet, the type of light you want to create, or create a different effect, or maybe some planet that is really green. So this is the effect that you can play with the directional light. Let's go cancel. And other parameters are the ones that you can start playing and discovering what they do. Let's say, for example, that you start playing with the scattering. Scattering is an interesting parameter that when it's combined with the SkyLight creates more details about the shadows and about how the light hit other objects and reflect into other surfaces. Now let's talk about the SkyLight. So I'm going to move this one and click to enable SkyLight. Remember that we mentioned a moment ago how the shadows are going to behave different when we add the SkyLight to the directional light. About the SkyLight, there is a couple of parameters that are worth to know. First one is real-time capture, which by default should be checked, and that means that they are capturing the light constantly. They are changing the light as the object moves. Of course, this requires more processing time. But you also can decide it, maybe uncheck the real-time capture and click the recapture. This is a button that every time you click it will recapture the light. Another important parameters to mention are the ones that you will find in the light mixer. One of them is the light color. So you can combine the directional light and generate one light, but also use the light color of the SkyLight to make even a different combination. So here's, you can see what is happening as we play with the SkyLight. It's changing the light that is coming from the sky, but generating an effect on the shadows and everything around. Sometimes when I create a day that is a rainy day, I have to play with these values to find exactly the light I want to have, which will be something like a grayish light. As with the directional light, you also have the intensity. If you increase the intensity, then you will see like the shadows start to disappearing. Believe me, you can take hours experimenting with the light until you create exactly what you are looking for, and it's an enjoyable process. And the next one I want to visit is the Exponential Height Fog. Without, you have the environment like this. With the actor, then everything starts looking more realistic. But how we can play with the Exponential Height Fog? Let's go back to the button. The first parameter to consider when you are working with the fog, even that you can create some effect at this moment as it is look for the volumetric fog. Check this parameter and see the difference on the scene. You see on the background how it is different. It creates like more fog at the end. This is convenient for you when you are creating an environment that is too long and you don't want to render what is on the background really far away. Then you can use the fog as a way to hit what is on the background and at the same time using all the resources of the computer. The volumetric fog simulates the scattering and the absorption of light through the particles in the air. And this adds a sense of depth of the atmosphere, and it creates a visual interest in the 3D scenes. The next important parameter is the scattering distribution. And this is how the light will spread from the source, from the focus point. So the best way to understand it is I'm going to remove for a second the volumetric cloud. And here you see the sun. And let's go back to the exponential fog. And let's reduce the scattering distribution. And you will see that the sun is a bit more clear. And if we increase the scattering distribution, let's say I think the maximum value is 2, you will see that the sun is spreading. At this moment we have 2. The original value was 0.2. If we move it down, let's say to 0.01, then you can see more clear the sun. I recommend you to try it yourself in your computer. Maybe you can't see it on this recording, but when you do it, you will see how the scattering applies for the sun or for the source of light. On the left, for the exponential fog, you have also the fog density. Let's increase a little bit this density. In fact, let's move it to a value, let's say like 10, and see what happens. So here you have, this is a scene that is completely fog. Completely fog. That's fun. Let's put it maybe in the value of 2. Too much at this moment, let's say 1. In fact, too much, let's say 0.5. Excellent. So if you start playing your game, you can see that this is definitely very foggy. Let's move it to 0.2. Yeah, I think this could be a good value. Maybe even 0.1. Excellent. I changed the density because I also want to start working with the albedo component. You select albedo, and then you can start changing the kind of color that is generated by the fog. And look how cool it is looking all around. This is not the source of light, which will be the directional light. This is the This is, let's say, the kind of color generated by the fog. Let me create a fog that looks more kind of a bluish or greenish, something like this one. And now let's look for another parameter, which is the emissive. The emissive is related to the light that will be generated by the fog. So you can define what the type of light that the fog will generate. It's not the light generated by the directional light, it's the fog that is generating its own light. Look at the difference. I'm going to cancel it at this second. Another important parameter of the fog is the start distance, but look for it inside the volumetric fog. So let's look for start distance, but pick this one on the volumetric fog. The parameter refers to the view from the camera where the fog will start. To understand this example a little bit better, at this moment we have 0, so the fog starts immediately in front of the camera. But let's say that we move it to 1000. Then you can see that there is kind of a line on the horizon where the fog will start. If you move it to, let's say, 3 meters, 300, then the fog will start 3 meters away from the camera. The start distance is an useful parameter when you want to see things very clear close to you and not so clear a bit further away. The other parameter related to the volumetric fog, in fact I'm going to filter by volumetric fog, is the view distance. This will provide is the distance from the start distance that you define here until the point where the fog will be rendered. So if we decided that the start distance is 3 meters and we added this 60 meters extra, it means that the fog will appear until it reaches 60 meters. Look at the horizon. Let's increase this to, let's say, 100 and see what happens on the horizon. Now the fog is moving further away. At the same time, you can also control the point where the fog will be cut. And for that, use the parameter fog cutoff that by default will be 0, which will be is infinite. But if you set it, look what happens. It is exactly until the point where you define where you want the fog to be covered. Again, this is about calculations for processing time that you should always consider. Let's enable again the volumetric cloud and talk about the sky atmosphere. For the sky atmosphere, there are several parameters I like to play with. The first one is the ground albedo. This is another parameter that helps you define the color that you want for the sky atmosphere to make it look with a different color. Again, this is another parameter that I play with when I want to be more precise about the environment. As an example, the rain environment. I like to play with these values. The other parameter is the Rayleigh Scattering. And here you can play as well about how is the scattering of the clouds that you are creating. Look how the original color was blue. And now if I move closer to the white, now you see that almost the entire sky looks like it is cloudy. And you can play also with parameters for making the sky look in a different color. And finally is the sky luminance or luminance factor. And again, you can play with these values to make the different effect or a combination of different effects to add more elements of luminance to the sky. I love to hear from you. Share what environment that you are trying to create. What other aspects of light do you want me to cover? I'm always reading your comments. If this video brought value to you, support this channel by giving it a like, hit that subscribe button, and ring the bell so you never miss out on more Unreal Engine tips, tutorials, and career recommendations to boost your game creator path. If you want to take a step further and have me at your side to help you transit this adventure, visit Woolen.com to learn more about the Game Creator Accelerator. Subscribe and let's have a one-on-one chat. And don't forget to check our video about how to make games without coding in Unreal and continue this adventure. Until next time, keep creating, keep sharing, and most importantly, keep dreaming big. See you soon, my fellow creators.